Welcome to the Dr. Geo podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Geo, where it is my intention to help you with your prostate health and how to live better with age. So, why are we talking to Akshay Nanavati today as it relates to prostate health? Well, probably very little. If there's a connection, I don't know it yet, but probably more towards the connection of how to live better with age. Thanks for being on, number one. I think that it's such a privilege to have you. Having you on is this is a whole different conversation, right? So I interview typically, medical doctors, urologists, and so forth, and so this is a lot different. And I think this is likely one of the most important conversations we can have for many reasons. Before we get into your event that's coming up in November and into those details and Antarctica, let me say this, so a lot of the people that listen to me are middle-aged men or middle-aged plus men or senior men. And they're trying to live their best life. They're trying to live better with age. I find throughout my conversations with them that oftentimes they sort of think or have the idea that as I get older, I want to do less. I want to be less physical, or I've earned that right because I've worked for 30, 40 years and now I'm retired and I've earned the right to do less. In my opinion, that's probably a less than optimal way of living. I think that particularly if you're interested in crushing it as you get older, I mean, clicking in all cylinders in your 70s, 80s, and perhaps 90s, you have to actually put work in and you have to stress your body, right? Because your body will respond favorably to many stressors. So you have to do more. You you take that to a little bit of an extreme. You have spent 10 days in darkness. You just came out of a fast, of a full fast. And while fasting in Arizona, you went hiking and running and did all kinds of activities during a fast at, over 100-degree weather. I remember when I met you that you said, that there's a benefit. It's like happy suffering. Your book is Fear Vana, which is a great book that we'll have in our show notes. There is such thing as, happy suffering, that you do this with intent, that at least, if I remember, if I'm paraphrasing you correctly, at least you have the option of suffering, of choosing to suffer, and there's benefit there. So why are you doing this? Why do you do this? And then eventually we'll get soon into your trip to Antarctica, your 1,700-mile trip. But what's the reasoning behind all this
Yeah.
for you?
I think, let's to answer that question as far as the why, let's start like why ultimately do anything, right? Like why do we do anything we do? And
Yeah.
at the core of it, when we dig deeper beneath all the reasons why make money, why get the relationship, one could say to be happy, but let's put it more in fulfillment, right? Like we're seeking inner peace, fulfillment, joy, whatever words you want to use. That's ultimately what we're seeking, all of us. And what I've come to learn through a lifetime worth of experience of having experienced great comfort, opulence, living a good life, and also experience the depth of suffering and hardship, both within and without, as in my own journey battling PTSD, depression, addiction, coming back from the war, seeing it, being in war zones and conflict zones, working with survivors of sex trafficking. I've come to learn that the path to truly attaining that ultimate joy, ultimate peace, ultimate fulfillment is by playing on the edges of the human condition. And when I say the edges, I don't just mean going into the edge of suffering as I do, like spending 10 days in darkness, running ultra marathons, talking about this journey, which we'll get to in Antarctica. I mean, pushing the edges because human beings, we think in contrast, right? My brain thinks of one thing in relation to another. We think in references to another. So those contrasts gives us perspective on life. And so to me, it's not just about seeking the edge of pain. It's seeking the edge of pleasure. I'm seeking the edge of all dualities, right? In this human condition in life, there's a series of dualities: life and death, light and dark, ego, humility, contentment, discontentment, fear and nirvana, pain, pleasure. There's a series of these. And if you really want to appreciate and amplify the intensity of this human experience and to feel more alive, to feel more bliss, in the words of Joseph Campbell, right? Follow your bliss, to feel that rapture of being alive, you got to play on the edges. You cannot truly know pleasure unless you know pain. You cannot really know the depths of happiness unless you know the hardship of sadness. And a very concrete example of this is when I came out of the darkness retreat. You mentioned, you briefly touched in, I did this extended period of time, one time 7 days, another time 10 days, sitting in a completely dark room, cannot see your hand in front of you 24 hours a day. When I came out and the first time I saw the light, it was almost blinding, and I remember being moved to tears with the way the world looked in those few moments. And I remember thinking a deep sense of visceral gratitude for all the suffering I've ever experienced in my life, because I realized in a very tangible way that I could never have seen the light that way, the way it looked in those few moments, unless I had first been in the dark, right? You can only really appreciate the luminosity of the light when you've been in the depths of the dark.
So do you appreciate light more?
Oh, I
Do you
appreciate all
appreciate
of it
sun
more.
more?
I appreciate all of it more.
So
Like,
these are things that we take for granted, likely.
exactly. When you really know what it's like to be without, you will appreciate what it's like to be with. I mean, coming out of a fast, I cannot tell you how good that first meal tasted. Even today, when I take a hot shower, I know it's all going to be gone. So
Mhm.
playing on the edges has been an access point to me, not just for a heightened sense of feeling alive, a heightened sense of gratitude for every bit of this human experience, including the hard times, because it's the hard times that make everything else so much more beautiful as well. But it also just gives me, I mean, it's enlightenment, it's transcendence. The suffering is the access point to transcendence, to tapping into the rewards of the human soul that cannot be unearthed without battling that dragon first. And so I seek bigger dragons to fight because they open doors to greater treasures.
I love it. If I didn't know you better, actually, I would say, God, this guy, like, his upbringing was really messed up. Like, he's trying to heal from his
And
upbringing. He grew up, I don't
mm,
know, in the slums of India, I would think, but I know better. Tell us a little
yeah,
bit about your upbringing.
yeah, I could not have had a better childhood. Great parents. They weren't extremely wealthy at the time, but certainly weren't poor, middle class. Now my dad's have done very well since then. But great. They give me an incredibly good life. Whatever suffering they might have been endured in terms of financial struggles, I never felt. So they gave me a fantastic life. I moved. I was born in India, lived in India, then Singapore, then moved to Austin, Texas at the age of 13. At about 15, 16, when I moved to Austin, I got very heavily into drugs, alcohol, lost 2 friends to it. I used to cut myself, burn myself. I still have these scars on my arm. Very self-destructive.
What was that about, actually? What would you say, and I'm asking because I have kids,
Yeah.
and a lot of the listeners have kids or grandkids. You would say, "Yeah, I got into drugs because of" what?
So my parents have asked this, like, what could we have done differently? And
Yeah.
not again, no traumatic childhood, not their fault. I got into a world where, like, I'm a person who clearly plays on the edge, and drugs became my vehicle because I got into a group of friends. And I don't, as an adult, I take responsibility for my behavior. But at the time, I was a very impressionable young child. Moved to 4 different cities, 3 different countries at 13 years. So I was very impressionable, wanted to be cool. So got into a group of friends doing drugs. And so I was the one who wanted to push that line and play on that edge. And my
Mm.
parents and me have talked a lot about this. They said, what could we have done differently? I think, and it's not their fault. Like, we all don't know what we don't know. They didn't know the things I do now, like all the outdoor sports that I do. They didn't know that was a thing people did. We grew up in a
Mm.
big city, right? But had they, let's say, pushed me into outdoor sports, or had I gotten into it, I don't think I would have gone down that path. So the point is to say, for a parent listening, it's like, every child's got their, like, I had a lot of energy that needed to be expended doing now the things that I do, and channeling that. What is the what is that unique element of your child, and how can you channel it? How can you find that thing? And again, not their fault at all. They didn't know these things were even a possibility.
Sure.
But I think, had I gotten into outdoor sports, had maybe either got into a friends group who doing that, or had I found that earlier, I would have gotten into that, and I would have gotten, like, probably done the same things I'm doing now, but just got into it even younger and earlier.
So one of the things, and I talk about parenting a bit, just
Yeah.
because I'm involved with it, heavily, and I enjoy it. I stalled there because, like, look, it's not enjoyable all the time, but
Mhm.
I think it's the biggest job that I have, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that we try, we are very careful with too much idle time. So too much I now, with idle time, you can also think, you can also kinda get into your head, learn how to be comfortable with yourself. But there most kids are not just meditating, they're with gadgets or with other friends or looking at websites or trying to, do exciting things. They're trying to increase their dopamine
Yeah.
somehow,
Yeah.
and oftentimes that leads to things that are not so great, which is why I think, participating in sports is
Totally agree.
it's a
Yeah.
good thing, right?
Yeah, and letting your kids suffer. That's a big thing
So
I parents make a mistake with.
our kids are Generation X, right? So we have millennials and then Gen X. And as an out, not as an outsider, I'm as an insider, and then observing other kids and friends of kids of friends. When I talk to friends who are parents, say, look, the kids are soft these days. Like they're just soft. Like they're anything, they're rattled or depression or anxiety. I think that a lot of it is our fault as parents. Now, if parents are listening to this, I don't shame. This is not a shaming thing. This is not a blaming. This is not a critique. I fail all the time as a father. But if my 11-year-old is doing something crazy or something that's not that we don't want him to do, it's not him, it's me. I have to take full responsibility. He's 11 years old,
Love
right?
that.
So I think we need to take full responsibility. Um, and this notion of how can I get my kids to, as you frame it, suffer in a way that obviously they don't die, right? So there's
Cool.
that fine line. And the thing is, we don't know what that line is. So we're like, oh no, don't suffer, no. But I think that we need to there are many times with our daughters where I've said, honey, it's okay to feel. It's okay to feel rejected. Okay to feel unwell. It's okay to feel and learn how to deal and learn tools that are not through pharmaceuticals to
Yeah.
deal
Yeah.
with life's challenges and emotions and so forth. And the other thing I'll add to that is my vehicle, the vehicle that I know to help them, as I frame it, get punched in the face and learn how to deal with it is through
Yeah.
sports,
I think sports is a great vehicle.
right?
Yeah.
Elbowed at soccer, get hit
Exactly.
with a
Yeah.
baseball, get hit oftentimes with a baseball.
Mm.
Figure that out. Is it's 100 degrees and you're a catcher with his catcher's equipment.
Yeah.
There is an element. Now, I think that parents are, you know, they won't use that terminology like suffering because we have, been taught that that's just a negative word, right? We
And
don't
I
want
use it
kids
very
to suffer.
intentionally. Yeah.
You do use it intentionally. You do. And I do think I do think to kind of summer it all up, I do think there's a benefit from them, what I would refer to as intelligent suffering and allow them to feel. What are your thoughts on kids? If I know you don't have your own, but I know you have friends. What are your thoughts on the younger generation and parents and the way we parent that you find that is most problematic?
Yeah. On the one hand, I just gotta say, like, I do empathize that the environment itself is way more challenging than when you and me grew up, right? Like, I'm probably the last generation that remembers life without internet. I
Yep.
grew up without dopamine machines surrounding me. So I empathize that the environment is way harder. And so you're trying to raise them in environment that feeds a lot of the terrible things that are horrible for their upbringing, right?
Yep.
So I can just empathize that in and of itself is a very, very challenging situation. But with that said, okay, what can we control? I think for one, to your point, like let them suffer. Obviously, I'm not saying send them into a freaking war zone or something like that, but let them get hurt. I see this a lot in India. In India, like Indian parents have notorious reputation of being overprotective, even more so, right? And so I see it a ton with extended family where you don't even let your kid fall. If they get cut a little bit, it's okay.
Don't do
They
that. Don't You're gonna fall. Don't there's a lot of don't do that.
There's
You're
a
gonna
lot
fall.
of don'ts.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then what are you also telling the kid? You're telling your kid, I have no faith in you, right? If they
Yeah.
fall, they'll get back up. And another thing, which you put beautifully, is it's okay to feel what you feel. A lot of times, parents, and it's coming from a good place, don't worry, don't stress, don't be scared, don't be nervous. We always say, don't feel what you feel. That's rejecting that feeling. Instead of saying, which I love what you said, it's okay, feel what you feel. Be with it. Be like,
Mm.
experience that emotion fully. To your point about stillness, like, it's understandable for a kid to try to do everything they can to avoid an uncomfortable feeling. Forget about kids. Adults do it. Adults will do everything we can to distract themselves from
That's
themselves.
right.
You know,
That's
Carl
right.
Jung, and you heard me say this before when we first met. Carl Jung said people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul.
That's right.
Adults do this, let alone a child
Yeah.
whose prefrontal cortex hasn't even been fully formed yet,
That's right.
right? So the point is, it's understandable for them to do that, but as a parent, you can create the space for them to be there. Be that parent to guide them through the challenge of it. It's going to be very, very hard to sit with a challenging emotion, acknowledging that that emotion is not negative. There's no negative emotions. There's no bad emotions. There's no good emotions. There's just emotions. And
Mm,
any emotion, when exercised beautifully, when channeled consciously, can be put to a powerful, empowering, and positive use, right?
mm,
So it can not like helping your child, guide them to feel that emotion fully, be with it, understand it, sit with it. Because the more they get comfortable, especially with the challenging emotions, the ones that we quote unquote frame as negative, right? Those emotions, when you master that, you master life, right? Like that's
mm,
the thing. When you can master those, then it doesn't, because life's going to throw them your way. And I've
for
seen
sure.
kids today, cousins of mine who from a young age have been overprotected. Now they're in college and older. They can't handle anything life has throws at them.
Right,
Anything.
right,
The littlest
right.
things life throws at them and they break. And it's not even their fault. I mean, at some point, obviously we all got to take responsibility, but it's not even their fault. From the I've seen these kids grow up from a young age, and I've told these parents, because they're family members of mine, this is not helping them. You think you're helping them, but you're not. And now
Yeah,
you see the impact of it.
well put. Why did you go into the military? In the US, it's something we choose to do. We don't have to do. And it didn't sound like you needed to go to the military
No.
to escape anything or for a better life. Why did you do it?
So when I was very, very heavily involved in drugs and alcohol, as I said, I lost two friends to it, was heading down a very dark path. And I saw the movie Black Hawk Down. You ever seen that
Mm,
movie?
sure, absolutely.
That movie was the trigger that changed my life, especially that scene when you see when those two Delta snipers, Gary Gordon and Randy Sugar, they're in a
Right.
chopper, they're in the
Mhm,
air, relatively safe, and they volunteer to go on the ground, knowing that hundreds of armed enemy personnel are heading their way, knowing they have no idea when reinforcements would arrive, but they volunteer to go down to set up a defensive perimeter to protect Michael Durant and the second Black Hawk that crashed. Both of them died, but Michael Durant is still alive today because of what they did. And
mm.
they received the Medal of Honor, which is the highest award for valor in the US military, posthumously, of course. And that just touched my soul. I mean, that kind of courage, I get moved talking about it, that kind of
Mm,
compassion, that self-sacrifice. I mean, that is the human spirit at its finest. That's humanity at its finest. And so
mm.
after watching that, I read the book Black Hawk Down, started devouring every book I could find on military and life and combat. And that almost overnight got me off drugs. And I wanted to join the military. I was living a worthless, selfish, meaningless existence. And I wanted
Were you going to
to
school?
I was in school, yeah, in Texas, in Austin, but I wanted to live in a world and experience the world where the good of the group matters more than your well-being. In the Marines, nobody gives a shit. Like nobody cares how good you feel that day. What matters is the men and the mission. And there's some as much as there's days where I hated it. Don't get me wrong. In Iraq, there were days when you absolutely hate it because you're exhausted and you don't want to go on mission. But looking back, those are some of the most beautiful moments of my life where what matters is the men and the mission. Right? That matters more than you. And that's so
Mm.
beautiful to live in that.
Did you join before the war? Before the war was announced? After the war?
Oh,
During the war?
this was after 9/11. It was almost inevitable I would be going to combat, which of course I did. But I wasn't even a US citizen when I joined. So it was very challenging on my parents.
Mm,
And it took me about a year and a half to get in because I have a blood disorder that two doctors told me would kill me in boot camp. I also have flat feet and scoliosis. So I had to get a medical waiver for all these conditions, which took a year and a half of literally fighting my way to go in the Marines. And the only reason I got in was because it was after the war. Because otherwise, these are all disqualifying conditions. But at that time, here's a young kid who wants to go Marine Corps infantry. We'll find a place for you. So I managed to get in, which I could not be more grateful for, and of course I survived. But it took a little while to get in. Just simply had to battle, like fight those medical disqualifications.
you survived, but my understanding is that it came close. You were in a couple of combat missions where many of your friends did not. Can you
So
talk about that?
yeah, I lost a friend in the war. He wasn't in my deploy with me. He had gone to Iraq right before me. We had
Mm,
actually volunteered to go to Iraq together every chance we could get. And one summer, I had gone to India to visit my family, and that summer, he ended up finding a unit to go with, and he was killed in IED. When I
mm,
was in Iraq, my vehicle drove over an active IED that for God knows what reason, it didn't explode.
mm, mm,
So I've always struggled with that for many reasons because in my mind now, like there was like for one, I felt like I should not have gone on that vacation to India because him and me volunteered every chance we could get. Twice we were told we were going by the Marines. Very last minute they canceled it. And then
mm,
so I figured, okay, we're not going right now. I'm just gonna go because summers my family was in India. I was going to see them. And then that summer he did end up finding this third time volunteering. He found a unit to go with. And in my mind, because he was an outstanding Marine, one of the greatest human beings you'll ever meet. But like whenever we used to train together, I would beat him by maybe a few seconds on a run or beat him by a few points on the rifle range. Not because I was a better Marine. He was a way better man than I am. But as a result, in my mind, especially if I had gone out there, I should have gotten that promotion that he gotten, so I could have been in the seat where he was sitting, so I could have
Mm,
hit with that IED. And rationally, I get it. I could have gone to war with him, and he could have still died, right? I know it. Bullets fly where they fly, bombs explode where they explode. You can't control that. But emotionally, it triggered a lot of that guilt that I didn't honor my commitment to go with him. And so when I finally did get my chance to go, it was my unit got activated 3 months after he was killed. I went out
mm.
there with that mindset that, again, naively, I'm not saying it was like you can't control what happens in war, but very naively at the time that somebody had to die, I'd rather it be me than anybody else.
So sorry to hear that, and thank you for your service. Um, it's amazing how eager you were to become a Marine, and many people are exactly the opposite. I was the opposite at 18, 19. I was like, There's no way. I hope I don't get recruited for anything." I mean, so I do appreciate the courage and the reasoning why you pursued that. And again, sorry for the
Thank you.
loss of your friend.
Thank you.
Has that played a role, those experiences, even from childhood, drug abuse? It seems like you were seeking for was seeking for pleasure. It is pleasurable for you, to some degree, but seeking for that level of excitement, high energy kid, then go to the Marines, your friend, um, passes away in combat. Um, has that played a role in your decision making moving forward and to all the things that you do now?
The Marines has shaped the very essence of who I am today. I mean, the Marines
Mm,
it taught me the beauty of suffering. I didn't really know suffering before this. A little bit as a child moving around, but like my life was not really a struggle. But Marines taught me the beauty of adversity. Marine Corps boot camp was hard, it was very hard. Infantry school was challenging. So it taught me the value of going to war with yourself. It taught me the value of living for something greater than yourself. In
mm,
Marine Corps boot camp, if somebody screws up, everybody gets punished for it. It
mm,
taught me the value of the very values and traits I embody today, seeking out struggle as a vehicle for enlightenment and for growth, living for a mission that's higher than yourself, self transcendence, living for a cause. I believe I have to me, I still to this day, I believe that this life that I've been gifted. I was born to great parents. As a result, I was automatically blessed with a million times more opportunities than most, right?
mm.
People born into war zones, people born into hell on earth and poverty, people born into places that they end up being trafficked. And I've seen a lot of this, right? I've worked in post conflict zones and stuff. And so to me, I owe a debt for this life that I've been gifted.
Mm,
Especially
mm,
looking back at my vehicle drove over a bomb. Why didn't mine explode?
mm,
I don't know. So but the Marines shaped everything about the ethos and the values that embody the very essence of my being today, especially
mm,
the values of honor, of
mm,
self-sacrifice, of courage, of
mm.
compassion, of living for something greater. That was everything that was birthed in me by the Marines.
How would you say we, people who've never been in the military, can try to replicate that and replicate those feelings and those experiences and those rewards that you experience from the Marines? Is there programs out there that you know of? Do you have one? I think hopefully you create one. I mean, I would
Great
love to.
question.
Yeah,
I think create a tribe that you go suffer together.
yeah.
Suffer together for a mission. I mean, it can be as small as like I, for example, have a local hiking group in Arizona here, right? I've started a local hiking group that's now grown to about 60 people in our group, and we
Mm,
go on hikes together. Some of them are
mm,
very, very challenging. And when we go on hikes together, nobody gets left behind. Some people are struggling more than others. It's not about like I especially love seeing somebody push their limit. So if I have to
mm,
slow down to help somebody on that hike, we so
mm,
be it. You right. So create little ways. It doesn't have to be as extreme as the
mm,
things they do. Go for hikes, suffer together. Because
mm,
one, when you're in that suffering, it starts revealing like suffering breaks down the masks and the facades we put on in the world. Because when
mm.
you're in that pure hell of your own suffering and pain cave, it starts to reveal the essence of the human spirit. It's pure.
The ego goes to sleep.
Exactly. You stop caring about when you're so deep in the pain cave, it doesn't matter what people think about. Like just when I did the fast a few days ago, right? Last week, I was after 5.5 days of no food. I went for a 5 hour hike, 4 hours, 50 minutes, just under 5 hours, with about 4,400 feet of elevation gain and 102 degrees. I was miserable. I was cramping. I was nauseous. I was
Were
dizzy. I
you
was
hydrating?
lightheaded. I was hydrating, but in Arizona, you have to drink a lot more water than you always think you
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
And
right.
and so I was ended up being dehydrated. I got an IV done the next day. And the person I was hiking with, Melissa, she was a new a new sort of member of her group, just the first time spending there. I don't even remember the things I was saying to her. We were just caught up yesterday, and she was like telling me some of the things. I don't remember saying it, but like
Mm,
all the she was saying because that filter had gone. And so the essence of me was being now that's an extreme scenario. I'm not saying you have to go that deep, but the point is suffering breaks down the masks because none of that matters anymore. The facade we put on, the mask we wear to put on a show of how we think the world should perceive us and who we want to be, that is gone. And what
mm,
reveals is the essence of the human spirit. It reveals humanity. It reveals the purity of the human experience. And if you don't like what you see when you're in there, that will reveal something for you to work on. You know, when I
mm,
was on this hike and there was five people, three of the dudes were way ahead. Melissa was hanging back with me just to help guide me. And the first thought in my mind was, I don't want to pass out because that would be an inconvenience to her.
mm,
It wasn't, I don't want to pass out because it would affect my well being. But I'm not, but the point I'm trying to say is not like say that in egotistical ways. I wasn't always like that. You know, if you had met the Akshay many, 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 many years ago, it would have been about me. So
mm,
the point is, if you go through suffering and you see something you don't like, that's okay. Now you get to work on it. Now you get to build it to the point that it becomes automated, till it becomes the version of you want to embody an ideal. Like that ideal can become something you don't have to think about anymore. You know, but suffering reveals that it is the you have to fight the dragon to unearth the treasure, and the greatest dragon you'll ever fight is the one within. So go to war within and do it with a tribe that will support each other in that place. You know, that's why we have my group of friends here is my family. You know, like they're
yeah,
none of them, well, a couple of them are veterans, but we didn't serve together, but now we've become like that because we have deep talks together. It's not just physical suffering. We have deep conversations where we're vulnerable. We share our deepest stuff with each other, right? So create that space for that, for not just that physical suffering together, but the emotional one as well. You know, the emotional, the mental, all of that. When you struggle together, when you be vulnerable, open with each other, it builds that camaraderie, it builds that tribe. And then you start to see that it's not just about me, it's the good of my group that matters more than me. That's
greater
such a
good.
that to me is the essence of humanity when you live for that, you know?
I love it. I know that you're currently not married and you don't have kids. What
Mhm.
would change if you were married with several kids? What would change? What do you think you'd be doing? Do you think that at 3 your kids are 3 and 4 years old, you'd be hiking, 50 miles with the, "Come on, move it, come on," and 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 another question that I asked when we met, I was like, "Who would marry you and say, 'Yeah, this is great. This is the guy that I want to'" I'm serious, somebody
That's a
has
good
to be,
question.
high energy just like you and be willing to do some of these things. I
Fair
can't
question,
see
yeah.
it being somebody who just kinda wanna stay home.
Yeah, no, fair question. So I was actually married for 9 years, and my ex-wife was very supportive of the things I do. Most people think it ended because of the things that I do. That's not at all why. I'm not
Mhm,
gonna get into that because it's not my place to talk about her spiritual journey. She went on her
mhm,
path, and I have, wish her nothing but the best. But the
mhm.
point is she was very supportive of it. And so it's somebody who has to they don't have to do the things I do because it you the trying to cross Antarctica, you're probably meeting like one other person on Earth. But
That's right.
but they have to at least get the spirituality of it. They have to value the intensity because when we talked about this when we met, like because of the things I do, the intensity at which I live my life is amplified. And the intensity doesn't just mean seeking out the depths of pain, even the pleasure, even the way I feel life. It's at an amplified intensity.
Mm,
And that intensity can be a bit much for somebody. After
mm,
my divorce, I did date somebody who thought I was too intense. It ended. So somebody who's going to embrace the intensity of life in their own way and wants to feel that, you know?
mm,
But I mean, I know I do want a family. I do want to meet somebody after, especially after Antarctica's over and get kids. And I'll probably tone down the things I do. Like I don't see myself maybe doing 110-day journeys across Antarctica after I have kids, but I'll never stop doing outdoor stuff. I
mm.
always will do it. You can do it in smaller versions, but I will
Sure.
100%, like my kids will suffer, you know? They will. And I say that from a place of pure love. Like I will make them suffer. But the thing is, like I've seen when you do that, especially a young child, they really want um, validation from their parents. So when they go through it and when they see you rewarding them from it, acknowledging from it, and they see themselves being able to transcend it. Like I've
Mm,
seen this, like I
mm,
mentor some kids. One kid I mentor, he's a race car driver. This kid he's now 18. I think I've been mentoring for the last 2 years since he's 16. And I mean, this kid's self-awareness is off the charts. Like if I was an idiot at his age
mm,
compared to where I am, right?
mm,
His work ethic, his discipline. And when kids start seeing that, okay, if I suffer and rise, it builds. How does confidence get built? Confidence gets built two ways. It's doing hard things, then again, being able to see in yourself the ability to rise above that. And this is an important other part that often is not talked about as much, but then the self dialogue after that happens as well. Because you can do hard things. And I've been in this point in my life where I would do hard things and always beat myself up because it wasn't hard enough. And that's also
Mm,
a miserable way to live, right? Because there's
mhm,
no end to that, you know?
right.
So it's doing the hard things, but you have to, one, let them do the hard things and then acknowledge them for the effort they put in, not for the result. Dr. Carol Dweck wrote a great book called Mindset, which I think we
That's right.
talked about when we met, where she talks about don't praise kids for talent, praise them for effort.
That's
So
right.
let them do hard things, let them fall. That's how you get confident. You don't get confident by standing in the mirror saying I'm awesome, I'm awesome, awesome. That's like cute stuff in the law of attraction world that I think is deeply flawed.
Yeah,
You get confident by looking in the mirror and saying I earned the right to say I'm awesome. You have to earn that right by doing the hard thing. Now I can look in the mirror and say I'm damn proud that I did this fast, like, or whatever. That's one example of many, many hard things I've done over the years.
sure.
But I'm damn proud that I was able to not only push through, like, no matter how bad in shape it is, I finished that hike, but I'm damn proud that the instinctual place my mind went was I don't want to pass out because I don't want to be a burden to that other person. I'm
Mm,
damn proud of that, And so you do the hard things, then you talk to yourself and you reinforce it, and it becomes this continuous cycle that keeps the evolution going. But do that for kids. That's how
amazing.
my kids will suffer, and I'll acknowledge them for it, and we'll suffer together. I will never. That's another thing. One last point. Like I see parents do this. Like I've seen parents will say to their kids, don't drink and do drugs, and they're getting hammered and doing drugs all weekend. You
That's
can't
right.
say one thing and do another.
Yep,
They are going to follow what you do, not what you say. So if you
100%.
live your life at the highest ideal, if you embody the ethos and the values you want to embody in your kid, you have to embody it. You have to
Yeah, I
live
think
your
I'm a better
best.
man as a result of being a father
Oh, I
because I had to
bet.
kinda resolve many of my,
I bet.
poor habits
Yeah, I
because
bet.
I know that, hey, they're looking, they're watching, and
Exactly.
they're learning, and I can see my son kind of sort of do everything I do now,
Yeah.
even if he doesn't know that, he's doing the things that I'm doing that I typically do, walks
Yep.
how I walk, expresses himself
Yeah.
in a similar way. That's such a great point. Thank you for that. That's a
Absolutely.
great point, and I can't wait to see, your offsprings and it'll probably be, mountain
Little
climbing at
savages.
3 and 4, doing Spartan raises at 10. Um, Joseph Campbell, and you quoted him in your book, and I love this quote, and it reads like this: "If your bliss is just fun and excitement, then you are on the wrong path. Sometimes pain is bliss."
Yeah.
So it resonates, right? It resonates because if, I joke around when I go to San Diego, I was like, why would I want to live here? It's always perfect weather, nice and sunny,
Mm,
70 something degrees.
mm,
Why would I want to live here? I wouldn't appreciate the great weather. I want,
mm,
bad winters with snow and,
mm,
like, below 0
mm.
to then, prepare for the fall and then, the spring and the summer and then, right? So, there's that element of it for sure.
Yeah.
Tell us about Antarctica and your the expedition that you will go through in November of 2023.
So what I'm currently training for is to do a 110-day solo 1,700-mile coast-to-coast crossing of the entire continent of Antarctica, where I'll be dragging a 400-pound sled with all my supplies in temperatures as low as minus 40 degrees with hurricane force winds, and one of the most hostile, unforgiving environments on the planet for 12 plus hours a day across the entire continent. And if accomplished, once accomplished, it'll be the first ever crossing of the continent without kites or dogs, purely human power, just man hauling that sled. And I'm 4 months away from this daunting and never before accomplished journey.
I every time I hear you say that, and this may be the 3rd or 4th time, I'm just like, dumbfounded, and,
It's
um, as I said, back when we met, I said, I almost wish that you were not such a great person and such a, wonderful human being, because 'cause I'd be like, "Yeah, yeah, go for that shit," and, suffer, but you're such an amazing person. I'm like, "Oh, man, I'm like, God," it pains me, right? But obviously this is your journey, and we have to honor that. Why are you doing this?
like any great goal, there's a two umbrella motivations: a selfish and a selfless. So selfishly, I am seeking, you can call it enlightenment. When you get to be in that level of stillness and silence. I mean, I'll be, for portions of the journey, the most isolated person in the entire world geographically. I mean, level of solitude that is going to be so intense and so profound. In that silence, you really start to hear. And you hear the things you don't hear in this world, in the distractions of this world. To me, you're accessing the door to God, to the divine. You're accessing that door to the divine. And as beautifully daunting and extremely hard as it is, what you find there is so profoundly beautiful. And I seek that. I want to open doors into the human soul that have rarely, if ever, been opened before. Not just my own soul, but into the human soul. And the suffering is not the reason I go. The suffering is the means, it's not the purpose.
Mm,
The purpose is the self-transcendence that you have to like. Suffering is a training ground for self-transcendence, because when you're so deep in that hell, because in Antarctica, life is also amplified. Like, the volume of life is dialed up 110%. So everything you feel more intensely. The highs are so much higher, but the lows are so much lower. And so
mm,
in this one, in condensed microcosm of time, you get to experience multiple lifetimes worth of the human condition. And that is so profoundly beautiful. So I go for that journey to awaken my own inner Buddhahood, to awaken my own divinity, to tap into that voice of God, to seek self-transcendence. And then selflessly, as I was saying earlier, I believe I owe a debt for this life that I've been gifted. Like, I
mm,
get to go to Antarctica. As much as I will suffer immensely out there, and I will, it's a privilege that I get to choose my own suffering. Most people
mm,
in the world do not get to even choose their own suffering because they're
mm.
born into hell on earth.
That's right.
So I'm not unaware of that, right? It's a constantly, I'm grateful for it. I could not be more grateful for it. And because I get to, there's a responsibility that I have. When you play so far out on the edge, the places I get to play, you're opening doors that are rarely, if ever, opened before. And because of that, I have to bring the treasures back from those places I get to go into the human, into serving my human family and helping others navigate their own polar storms, helping others. Everybody's got their own. Everybody suffers. Everybody's battling their own polar storms. Everybody's got an Antarctica to cross. But
Mm,
because I go so far out there, I get to access wisdom and treasures that are not otherwise revealed. And so my responsibility to pay back this debt I owe, to earn this life I've been gifted, is to bring back that wisdom and to help others. I mean, when we first met, it's because I was speaking at an event. I was invited to speak at that event because of these things that I do, because of the wisdom I've gained. I'm a humble messenger of what these places reveal when you get to go there. And so
mm.
I just get to be the messenger, and it's my responsibility to bring that wisdom.
Why 3.5 months? I get it, but why 3.5, why not a month and a half? Why not, you know, 600 miles? Why 1,700 miles?
So
Right?
this
Why that extreme? How did you come up with these numbers?
So this is kind of the last remaining big feat in Antarctic exploration that hasn't happened yet. To do a full coast to coast crossing without wind power, without kites or dogs, has not happened. So part of the draw is you're stretching the very limits of human endurance. I mean, and I don't say this in an egotistical way, just the nature of the feat alone, once accomplished, will be one of the greatest feats of human endurance ever. That's just how big this feat is. And so stretching the limits of human endurance to see, it doesn't just push my own limits, it's expanding humanity, right? I mean, I can't tell you, you told me this earlier, I can't tell you how many people write to me to this day, and they will say to me that I was going through a hard session in the gym and I thought about you and it allowed me to push a little harder than I would have otherwise.
Mm,
So I want, and there's plenty of people who came before me who are that for me. So it's the cycle that we're all in together. And so pushing that edge, doing something that's never been done before, I get to do that for others. And so that's just what it takes. Like, to do a coast to coast crossing, that's how long it takes. And 110 days is, I mean, it's borderline impossible in 110 days, let alone in 70 days. I mean, the daily distance you have to cover dragging a
yeah,
400-pound sled, 110 days is kind of stretching the Antarctic season as almost as long as you can possibly stretch it. That number wasn't entirely random. It was very well calculated, not at all random. It was very calculated based on looking at other expeditions, how much of a daily distance is even somewhat feasible, how long can you stretch the Antarctic season? Because Antarctica really has two seasons, summer and winter. And summer is not exactly summer, right? Antarctic summer is still pretty savage and cold.
yeah.
But once you start getting into Antarctic winter, planes can't even fly in and out to pick you up. And toward the 110 days was taking all this data from previous expeditions, combining with as long as the Antarctic season can be stretched to attempt to do that. But even at 110 days, I mean, the expedition manager at ALE, which is Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions, they're the one who managed the logistics for all adventurers in Antarctica, has said that more than likely anyone who tries this will probably fail. That's just how big the journey is. That's how
And
daunting
what
it is.
does
There's degrees.
failure look like?
So, I mean, a worst case failure means death, but it's not as dangerous as like Alex Honnold's free soloing up, not remotely
Yeah,
as dangerous. It's
yeah,
not as dangerous. The draw to me is not the danger, it's the suffering is the draw to me. It's far more suffering than even mountain climbing. Like I've done a lot of mountaineering, way more suffering than Everest, but not as dangerous. So now obviously you can't eliminate that possibility. It's still there, but it's not like as much as let's say if I was climbing K2 or something.
right.
But the other factors are just, I mean, the cold, the hostility of that, and more than likely failure. If I don't succeed, it's just I couldn't cover the distance in time. So I could be 100 days there, and let's say instead of 1,700 miles, I make it 1,400. And
But who's gonna know this? Who's gonna get you? How are you communicating with me? You're there alone in this remote,
yeah, so
cold
I'll
place.
have a live tracker following along. ALE, who is Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions, they have their base camp called Union Glacier, where they will be managing all my logistics every evening. In fact, I'll be with the satellite phone checking in with them.
Mm.
And let's say, for example, I've only made, I don't know, I'm just throwing out a number, 1,400 miles after 110 days. They'll come pick me up from that point,
Mm.
because that's because they last season, this is last year in November, December, the Antarctic season. Three expeditions attempted a partial crossing of Antarctica. This is not a full coast to coast crossing like I'm planning. And all three failed, even at a partial crossing, simply just because they couldn't cover the distance they needed to cover in the time frame.
In on your sled, part of the 400 pounds of stuff that you're carrying there, does that include enough food for energy to get you through?
That's the heaviest part of the sled is food. I'll be eating about 62 to 6,600 calories a day.
Mm.
And even then I'll be burning 8 to 10,000. So that's why I'm actually putting on weight. I'm trying to get fat before Antarctica because I will lose a ton of weight out there. Uh,
Fasting for 5 days in a row and then going hiking is
that was
not
not
the way to you
no.
probably lost
So
weight
I
in
lost
that.
16.6 pounds in five and a
Right.
half days, but that was for a few other reasons. Now I've stopped. No
Yeah.
more fasting till Antarctica. Uh,
Alright.
now I'm working on getting fat and getting fat fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, why I know you had to cut off your finger. Why did you have to do that to do this expedition?
So when I was in Antarctica a year and a half ago on another expedition, I got frostbite on these two fingers.
Those are
Pretty
your middle for those that are not
Oh, yeah,
watching.
sorry, right ring finger and
Yeah.
left middle finger. The
Okay.
frostbite was quite bad. I think you saw the picture when we met. It was
That's
very
right.
black. It was quite dark. Now on the right ring finger, the tip of it was black and completely died. I had to get it cut off. It was just, it was dead. That finger was dead.
Yeah.
It had to be removed. On the left middle finger, it recovered fully. It was a full finger. But the problem is once you get frostbite, you're always more prone to frostbite. So when I was in the Arctic, I was just in the Arctic about a month and a half ago on a training expedition. And I was out there for about 29 days on the ice, and it got to like minus 37, pretty cold. And even on relatively warm days, like -5, -10, the tip of that middle finger was giving me a significant amount of trouble. Like there were days
Mm.
where every other finger was fine, but that finger felt cold.
Hmm.
And now because it's gotten frostbite for the rest of my life, that finger will be, especially the tip, will be more prone to frostbite.
Mm.
So to me, that's a huge liability. I would imagine myself, I'm 60 days in Antarctica and I'm crushing the distance. I'm hitting the time that I need to hit in the distance I need to hit. And if that finger gets frostbite, my expedition's over. So
Mm.
to me, being that it was a huge liability, I decided to prophylactically have it removed. So it was a good finger and it was quite a challenge because no doctors wanted to cut it off. They were ethically like, it's a good finger. We can't cut it off.
Yeah.
But it took a lot of convincing and my mom's support. We got this done when I was in India. My mom was the one who convinced the doctor to cut it off. Because what kind of
Jeez.
mom would say cut off my son's finger unless there's a
Exactly.
really good reason? And so
Cut off
that
my
was the
son's good finger. Yeah, no, it's
exactly
still working. No, it's still functional, but you
exactly
need to cut it off.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it was fine in the normal world, totally fine in the normal world, but in cold it was giving me trouble. Like I met a doctor in the Arctic who said that his recommendation was not only do I not go to Antarctica, his recommendation was I stop doing cold weather expeditions. To me,
Huh.
that wasn't an option. That's not going to happen. So I cut off the tip of the finger.
You mentioned earlier on that you have a blood disorder.
Mhm.
How can that what is that blood disorder? How can that affect your expedition?
So my blood disorder is called thalassemia, which
Mhm,
so normal guy will have about 14 to 16 grams of hemoglobin. I have about 11. So hemoglobin transports oxygen through the
mhm,
body. Mine is significantly lower. So less oxygen flowing through the body is less than ideal for anybody, let alone an endurance athlete at my level,
mm.
right? Because you need oxygen to flow through the body. So the doctor who removed the first finger and both fingers, he said like almost certainly your thalassemia contributed to your frostbite. I mean, you have less oxygen flowing through your, especially your extremities, right? And so when you're at the South Pole, you're at altitude. You're at about 9,000 feet. The South Pole is at over 9,000 feet. So you're not talking altitude. You're talking extreme cold, and you have less oxygen flowing through your blood. So it's less than ideal, but it's not going to stop me from doing this.
Most activities are less than ideal and you've done them, right? So even ultra endurance marathons or ultra endurance, activities,
Mhm.
you've done those, and those
I've run
are less
before. I've
than
done
ideal,
many ultra
so
marathons. I mean, like I said, two doctors told me that Marine Corps boot camp would kill me because of my
yeah,
thalassemia. So I
yeah.
actually had to go see a third doctor who finally gave me the letter, and then I took that letter to MEPS, the Military Entrance Processing
How
Station.
is it that with lower human, hemoglobin levels than, normal, you can accomplish all it doesn't in my mind, doesn't make biological sense. What's happening there? Is there a way that your hemoglobin is rising, um,
I mean, to me, it's
either
just the will.
exogenously or something? Do you still measure your hemoglobin levels and it's
Yeah,
still
last
at a
time I
low?
measured it, I think it was 11 point something. So
Yeah.
it's still low. It's still in the 11s, and you can't, from my understanding, you can't cure that. Like, there's no way to
Yeah,
cure
that's
that.
right.
But I
So
mean,
what's
the
happening? Because you need to transport oxygen to your cells for physical energy
yeah,
and activity. Particularly extreme activity. So, any
exactly.
idea what's happening physiologically that you're able to accomplish these goals?
Certainly no expert in what's happening physiologically, but to me, it's the will. Like the mind can transcend the limitations of the body. When you
Mm,
exercise the will and when you tap into that, what we are capable of is awe inspiring. I mean, people
mm,
literally, even on this fast, were like, dude, how are you still alive? I've
mm,
done so many things that I've gotten heat exhaustion multiple times, hypothermia, because I push that edge, but the will is is limitless. I mean, you
mm,
can never measure that in a lab. You can never measure that in lab. There were a point when doctors thought it would be impossible to climb Everest without supplementary oxygen. Reinhold Messner went out and did it. So it's that's all it is. And this didn't happen overnight. I wasn't a person who do the things I do overnight. I built that will up. So wherever you are in your journey, start by pushing it a little bit, then push it a little further, then push it a little further. But when you tap into that, I mean, it's awe inspiring to
mm.
see the power of that human spirit. I mean, it is to me, that's like one of my favorite quotes of all time from Vince Lombardi. He says, I firmly believe that any man's finest hour, the greatest fulfillment to all he holds dear, is that moment when he has worked his heart out in good cause and lies exhausted on the field of battle, victorious. And when you
Mhm,
exercise the will, when you go to war with yourself and you tap
mhm.
into that, you feel something, you're tapping into
Yeah.
the essence of the human spirit, and that victory is it's life.
Then that's why we participate in marathons and Spartan
Exactly.
races and obstacle courses and things of the sort. To It's for a feeling. I
Hmm.
remember which I actually after my conversations with you, I think, I'm gonna go back and do one of those obstacle courses actually.
Awesome. Awesome, brother.
So, it's inspiring.
Thank you.
And you're looking for a feeling. It's not about health. I could do many things to be healthy.
Yeah.
It's about how do I wanna feel? Do I wanna feel like, "Wow, I did something that it's beyond what I thought I could ever do?"
Yeah.
Um, uh, when I did a marathon, even half marathons, there is by the end, a spiritual, feeling of almost like your God or God is when you're hitting the
Yeah.
wall, for example, right? When you're so cramped up on that 25th mile, you have a mile to go. What takes you to the 26th mile, right? God, people,
Yeah.
the energy, the camaraderie, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful experience
I
that I
really
think many people don't get a chance to experience.
yeah. It is an experience to God when you go so far into that, what I call the quote unquote pain cave. Because, on the one hand, it's the human will, but in my mind, it's a duality. Like I'm tapping into my own will. And again,
Yeah.
whatever your paradigm around this is, if you don't believe in God, the universe, something, I think there's like, I've started to experience, I mean, I've experienced this tangibly. Like there's something also beyond me that allows me to push forward further than I can even believe my own
Mm,
what I think I can do. And
mm.
you get to taste that when you go so far out onto the edge.
Akshay, tell us about Bodhi. Who's Bodhi?
So Bodhi is my little buddy here. It's a stuffed pillow.
Mm,
This was inspired by the movie Castaway. If you
mhm.
remember Castaway, where Tom Hanks has that little volleyball he talks to called Wilson,
Yep.
right? So inspired by that, I'll be spending 110 days completely alone, right? Completely alone, no other human interaction. And so inspired by Castaway, I created this little stuffed pillow that I named Bodhi. It's got a laughing Buddha on it.
Mhm,
Why a laughing Buddha? Because it has this two elements that to me are some of the most important tools I will need out on the ice. One is a sense of humor. You have to be able to laugh when things get bad. You absolutely need to keep that sense of humor. And two, the Buddha is for me, this is a very spiritual journey to awaken my own inner Buddhahood, right? That we all
mm,
have, to awaken
mm,
that inner divinity. And I named him Bodhi because Bodhi in Buddhism is short for Bodhisattva, which is a being that has attained enlightenment but chooses to sacrifice going to nirvana to help others on earth who are suffering. It's a concept I
mm,
deeply resonate with and I very much feel is like the ethos I'm striving for. So he's my little buddy that I chat with when I'm alone out there. I experienced it when I was solo in the Arctic, and
mm,
I will be taking him in Antarctica as my little buddy. And it's amazing how quickly you lose the sense that this is just a stuffed pillow.
mm.
I mean, first day you recognize it, it feels a little weird. By day two, day three, it's gone, and you're having dialogues that are as real as a conversation that you and me are having right now.
So that's your Wilson.
That's my Wilson.
Um, and so at some point you're talking to him, "Hey, buddy, are you okay? Hey, is everything like what kind of conversations?"
You know, we're having dialogue. So, for example, like I'll give you a good story about how fascinating how real Bodhi becomes. You know, when I was in the Arctic on the third expedition, I was in three expeditions. The third one was 10 days alone. Usually, while I'm cooking in the tent of the vestibule of the tent, I'm boiling snow for my water. And while I'm cooking, Bodhi's sitting in the corner and we're chatting about the day, chatting about what's going through my mind, or quote unquote chatting, right? And then after I finish cooking, I bring Bodhi into the tent. I chat a little bit before I go to sleep. So it was day 6 out there, day 6, and I'm only 6 days alone so far. And I get back in my tent after boiling my snow, and I'm about to go to bed, and I realize that I left Bodhi out in the vestibule. So I open the tent door, I grab Bodhi, and I go, Bodhi, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to leave you out there. And the craziest part is after 6 days alone, I wasn't just saying the words, "I'm so sorry." I genuinely felt guilty. There was an
Mm,
emotional feeling of guilt and sadness, like I left a friend out there, like I left my puppy out there, you know? And this was only after 6 days alone. So, it to me, the value of this is it's actually giving you a place to go that you can talk to again, in my mind, you're talking to God, right? You're talking
yeah,
to you can call it talking to your subconscious, but by giving this external force, this thing to attach onto, right?
yeah.
I'm allowing that dialogue to be a little bit more two-way, even though again, ultimately, of course, it's me talking to myself, right? But it's not. But now I have a face to talk to. That's why I love in Castaway how real it becomes, and I totally get it. Like I
Mm,
totally get how real that would become. And so I have dialogues, and there were days where I'll be sitting out there and like I'll be like just like in Castaway, he says it. He's like, I know Will like Tom Hanks will say, I know Wilson, and it's like, and I'll be like, Bodhi, I know you should. It's like he's telling me, but things I need to know in myself. Like I know I should be doing this, you know. And it's really fascinating and it's incredibly valuable. Like it's an incredibly valuable tool to and if you apply it to the real world, I'm not saying you need to have like a being that you talk to, but what the value is and how the application here for anybody listening is take time for stillness so you can have a dialogue with yourself that you're not having otherwise, right?
right.
So you can hear, so you can engage in that voice that is otherwise being silenced by the million things we do to distract ourselves from ourselves. Because we do, I mean, even the quote unquote positive things like working and working out, which are
Right.
much better than, let's say, drinking or doing drugs, of course. But often, very often, we are doing them only to distract ourselves from ourselves. But when you
We have
talk
an
to,
opportunity,
yeah,
to paraphrase Carl Jung, right? To bring our subconscious to the conscious.
until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
Mhm.
And that to me, I'll say that again, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate.
Amazing.
Stillness, being able to dialogue with Bodhi, being able to dialogue with yourself, that's what it does. It makes the
Mm,
unconscious conscious.
love it. Is your expedition through Antarctica, is that gonna be filmed, and will it be, a Netflix show or something like that? hopefully?
We are creating a documentary around it and working with the team in Hollywood. They came and filmed when I was in the Arctic. They filmed me in Iceland, in Mexico when I came out of the darkness retreat, training tire dragging here in Arizona. In Antarctica, I'll be completely alone, so it'll just be me with the GoPro, filming like a video journal as I descend into madness out there with my
Mm.
conversations with Bodhi. But we will be then turning it into a documentary to tell the story, whether it goes on Netflix or wherever. We'll find out soon enough. But it will be a documentary we're creating.
How will you stay charged up with all your electronic devices? Make
Antarctica
sure
is
you have enough.
24 hours daylight. So I have a solar panel.
Mm,
And there's no problem getting plenty of sun out there.
right,
Yeah.
right, despite the cold weather, right?
Yeah. But
How much is this costing you?
so the journey is going to cost me $750,000. You're
And where's
flying.
that money? Where in what part of it
Why is that?
what's the
Yeah.
breakdown of that?
So, that number is obviously not something I randomly came up with.
Yeah.
ALE, Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions, they gave me that quote. That's how much it costs to, I mean, because going to these places, like just flying to Antarctica is $60,000 about.
Mm,
Flying from Union Glacier Camp to Bay of Whales, which is my starting point on the other end of Antarctica, that's like a 12-hour flight with 3 fuel stops. We'll be landing in
mm,
the middle of Antarctica, filling up fuel barrels. That flight alone is like a $250,000 flight because it's multiple like flights and the fuels to get there. Yeah, and normal Antarctic season for adventure is 85 days. They're extending the season just for me, which means there has to be a pilot on staff, a doctor, logistical support team, all of these factors you're paying for, the flights, the pickup flight from the other coastline of Antarctica, all of these things, the staff, the logistics, the fuel, the safety measures, the permits. There's a permit that you need to go to Antarctica. All of these things combined is what ALE has given me that number. And so right now
wow.
I'm in big time fundraising mode because I've invested my heart, my soul, my body, my mind, my spirit. I've lost 2 fingers for this money. I mean, I've spent over $500,000 of my own money
Mm,
on previous expeditions as well as self-funding the documentary. I'm fully in every single way on this. And now I'm reaching out for outside support as much as possible to help fund this. And so not just for me to cross Antarctica, but so we can tell the story and inspire other
yeah.
people to make their own crossings.
So for my listeners right now, I think that we have an opportunity. I this is the first time I do this. I don't fundraise for anything, but I think this is an important event to contribute, whether it's $5, $10, whatever you can,
Yeah.
to Akshay's cause here. He's inspired me in ways that I mean I've just touched on it a little bit here, but my life is better just from my interactions with Akshay. So I want to make sure that you're properly, especially you use whatever platform I can to have my audience contribute
Thank,
to
thank
your
you.
cause. So how can they do so?
So at greatsoulcrossing.com, great SOUL, greatsoulcrossing.com. There's the
Okay.
crowdfunding page that's up there. And like you said, every bit makes a difference. We just launched this, we're building, and it's continuing to grow from here.
Well, listen. Um, I think we'll speak again or be in touch before
Before we go.
November. What's the actual date that you'll leave?
And end October, I'll be flying down to Chile, from Santiago to a place called Punta Arenas in the
Hmm.
southern tip of Chile, and then sometime towards very early November, flying from Punta Arenas to Antarctica to Union Glacier Camp, and then from Union Glacier Camp to Bay of Whales.
Are you going to spend time in Chile just hanging out by the beach before you go?
At that
Or
point, your mind's so. I mean, even now, when talking about it, saying it, knowing that it's less than 4 months away, I got butterflies in my stomach rising as I'm speaking these words to you. So at that point, I'll be so. I won't be able to relax on a beach. I'll just be like, I just want to go now. You need to get. It's go time. Like so, my parents wanted to come drop me off. A few friends were. I'm like, don't come when I drop me off. Come on the back end. Come pick me up at Chile. But when I'm going out there, I don't want to be thinking about what I'm leaving behind. I need to be thinking about what's ahead. Um,
man.
yeah,
Well,
it's
I'm
terrible.
rooting for you, brother. I am rooting for you. Thank you for doing this. Really, for all of us. You're doing this for the rest of us. You know, I'm always interested in the conversation of how can we live better with age,
Mhm,
right? So, um, typically for many people, they decline with age. So from
mhm,
50 to
mhm.
60, 60's old, you get, sore joints and back pain and whatever. 70, you kind of
Yep.
hunched and all this kind of stuff that happened. 80, forget. I am very much into the conversation of how can we do better at 60 than we did at 50 or
Yeah.
50 at 40 or 70 and 60. As you get older, and I see it all the time with people where they're stronger, fitter, better health, their lipids come down, right? Their prostate health improves, everything improves as they get older. I have a patient that, he's like, deadlifting 250 pounds at 75 years
Awesome.
old, which he couldn't do that in his 50s.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome.
he's literally has gotten stronger with age, right? So what you're doing here, and you're helping us deal with our fears in a more healthy way. You're helping us with knowing that, you know suffering is a word that's used negatively, but in the proper context and in the context that you present it, is an opportunity for us to live better.
Yeah.
And in this case, in my world with age.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan. I root for you, and you
Thank you
really have
so much.
changed my life
That
for the
means the
better,
world.
and I thank you for that.
It means the world to hear that. It when knowing that my journey is making a difference to others on theirs, it warms my heart, man. So appreciate you saying that, brother.
Thank you for being on. I'll have your website on the show in the show notes. And is there any other website or anything that people should follow you, or
If you want to follow along the journey,
Twitter?
Instagram is primarily where I'm at Fearvana, Fearvana. And then
Okay.
obviously fearvana.com. But at Fearvana, I share the training process, all the things I'm going through before I even get there.
All right. We'll link it all up.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for being on. This is Dr. Geo signing off. I will talk to you next time. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Dr. Geo podcast. You can watch all episodes of this podcast and much more by subscribing to my YouTube channel on youtube.com/Geo Espinoza ND. If you love what you heard today, you can help by leaving a 5-star review of the podcast on Apple and Spotify, as each review helps us reach more men who are serious about improving their urological health and how to function better with age. And for the latest research and actionable takeaways in the world of men's health and integrative urology, sign up for my newsletter at drgeo.com. I'll see you next time.